So I did this interview with Francis Billinghurst, The Magic of You, and she has a podcast on YouTube where she's an Alexandrian priestess, and she interviews people. I'm not sure if it is all priesthood, but just people that, I don't want to say interesting people because I was interviewed, but people that
the most interesting people.
yes. And she does this predefined, questions and answers. I think, I want to talk about today is one of the things that she asked me, which I think that it's very, very important. She asked me, when did the craft, or what occasion did this happen? When did the craft help you in a period that you needed support, meaning that you needed like a dark night of the soul or some kind of, difficult time in your life? And how did the craft help you overcome it? I am absolutely, and maybe because I have this very defined notion of what the craft is and my experience in it's very clear.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was always told by my teachers all over the years that the craft is not a place for therapy. It isn't a place where you go to have therapy or support.
Yeah.
I know that many covens do think, and I'm talking about Alexandrian covens, do think that is a place where people can go for support. I absolutely disagree. I think that a coven is a group that works magic, and that's all. For therapy, I think that we should look for people that are professionals that could actually help you professionally. Yeah. And that's therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists. That is not the function of a coven. A coven shouldn't be a place where, can you imagine all of these people that, counseling a person that probably has a very serious psychological issue, with no experience whatsoever in therapy, and they're doing therapy in the group.
No, it's dangerous, right? And it's dangerous. It's dangerous because you hold title. So therefore, you hold title as priest or you hold title as high priest, and there is this there's this like delusion, honestly, that you might know better or that you know how to guide someone through a psychological episode or whatnot, and you don't. And then that person has belief and faith in you. And then it just devolves into, then a coven just devolves into a group of what? Friends, right?
Friends, whiners.
What? Well, yeah, right. So it's not what the purpose of the coven is.
And then it becomes like, this can derail into this slow, very consistent snowball effect of who can whine more, right? Yeah. And who can be more miserable. And then it's a competition of the misery. It's a society of the cult misery. Yeah. And it really is something that it's not the purpose of the craft. The purpose of the craft is actually to worship the gods. It's to do magic and to evolve spiritually. It has nothing to do with any therapy or helping people with dark nights of the soul.
I think I could be totally wrong on this.
Yep.
And I wonder if this is this kind of like carryover from our major religions, right? So I wonder if this is a carryover from like either Islam or probably Christianity and Catholicism, where you go to the priest for the sacraments, like confession, for example, which is a form of therapy, right? It is sort of therapeutic. Or they look at the church and masses and church services as sanctuary, where they will get, some type of solace, right? Some type of relief, some type of support. And the craft is just not that way, as you said, right? That's not our purpose. We're not a sanctuary for those who are struggling.
I actually haven't looked at that and in that perspective, and you're absolutely right. I think that people often transport these notions of Catholicism or even Christianity in general, right?
Yeah.
Christianity in general, where people go to these churches and they're, that's therapeutic for them. The craft shouldn't be a place where that happens. I mean, of course, there are psychological that will happen in the craft, but that is not a place of remediation or even healing of psychiatric or psychological issues. So I think that there is more proper ways of doing that rather than. So I completely disagree with.
Yeah.
I said no.
Whoops.
I really don't think that is the place. If there is anything in the craft that will help you to overcome difficult times, being that psychological or otherwise, it's the build up of an individual that's spiritually strong enough to actually deal with any difficulties. And that's for the training, right? So that
I was just going to say that. I'm like, it's the craft can fortify you. Right, in this, and from your training, absolutely.
So this is what I talked about, and of course, I talked about many things and on that interview, but I thought that that was the highlight for me because I thought that, and then recently in the Alexandrian soiree, the one that we did, the virtual Alexandrian soiree. There was this question about the magical names. Do you remember this?
I do. Yeah. How does one receive a magical name?
Yes. And of course, the how, it's one of those things that we really don't reveal, not because it's a secret, but because it's actually sacred for us.
Yeah.
However, the purpose of a magical name in the craft has nothing to do with pseudonyms or like you have in literary works or, things like that. That is not a magical name. A magical name is very specific. In the Alexandrian tradition, actually, it's very specific, and it's obtained in a very specific way. So when we talk about magical names, those who not have received them in or within the Alexandrian tradition, they cannot comprehend or can only speculate about how and what they mean. So I think that magical names are magical, really. They're not pseudonyms. They're not, names like, my name, for instance, Karagan. Karagan is not my civil name, of course. And Griffith is actually one of the names of Jamal's grandmothers, which I took because I thought that it was very appropriate because she was a spiritualist and a wonderful woman. So and connected, not openly, but connected with some spiritual paths along the way. And I think that she transmitted that in a way to Jamal. And I thought that it was a really good homage to pay to this wonderful woman. And so Karagan is not my, but this is not my magical name. My magical name is not Karagan,
Yeah.
And people think that this is, that's his magical. It's not a pseudonym or somebody or a name that is, your nom de plume or whatever you want to call it, excuse my French, is actually not a magical name. So some people do want to separate their personas, right? And a persona is also not a magical thing. A persona is another thing. So it depends, where or what context we're talking about. But I think that a magical name is to be used inside of a magic circle only.
Yeah.
Only. And it shouldn't be known to anyone other than those inside of that particular magical circle. And sometimes some of the members of the coven, not all of them know the magical names of each other because they weren't used. So they didn't witness that magical name. And that magical name should never leave the magical circle.
Yep.
So this is basically the definition of a magical name. And sometimes people don't really understand this. They think that it's a complete different story.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that has gotten watered down, right, over time, where, from I guess like the 70s and then into the 80s and 90s, especially like during like Llewellyn publications, where you had to get a magical name now that you practice the craft, without really understanding where that actually came from. What a magical name actually is from British traditional witchcraft as the way that we practice it. So then you get a lot of Lady Starwinds and Lord Starhawks and all these kinds of things, right? And it just ends up being in some ways just pageantry, and just sort of a public a public persona. But yeah, you would never have your magic name revealed in a public forum. It's sacred.
The other thing that really bothers me as well, and always did, is this attachment of lord or lady into the individual. The individual is reporting themselves as lord or lady blah.
Yeah.
I know that in our line, in the Boston line, as I call it, the Boston line of Alexandrians, the lord and lady is something that actually exists. They do have that usage of that particular pre-name or title or whatever you want to call it. And that's another thing that we can talk about, the titles of high priest and high priestess, and even priest, right, or priestess. Yeah. The lord and lady was always taught to me that should be only used by those who would call you. So if you would be lord something, then you shouldn't be saying, I'm Lord blah. Somebody would call you that, but you shouldn't present yourself as such.
Yeah.
And that was the rule. But then it changed, and everybody was like, I'm Lord blah, blah, blah.
Everybody.
And of course, this is somewhat ridiculous to the eyes of Alexandrians in the UK, because of course they don't really use that, but there is some instances where they did actually, but they never used it as much as they did in the United States. So it actually went out of control, like many things in the United States go out of control.
Yes, they do. We take it to the extreme.
Yeah. So, and that is not really doing actually a disservice to the thing, The other thing is the time.
Well, again, it waters it down, right? Everything, that's the problem, I think, here, especially in the United States, is this oversaturation of things. We take it to an extreme, and then it becomes meaningless. So in many ways, I think the word witch has become meaningless in the United States. And I think that's why we oftentimes prefer, initiate, or we prefer priest, for example. And then lord and lady, that's a tough one for me, because I can't sometimes separate my own biases, because all I hear oftentimes is ego when I hear people pronouncing themselves as lord, right, as lord and lady, even outside of initiatory witchcraft. And I don't know, where does it come from? Does it come from Gardnerian? Does it come from Buckland? Does it come from, I don't know where who started that lord and lady business?
Someone that had nothing to do.
Exactly. Nothing to do, and nothing to do with witchcraft, or just like, they just wanted.
I think there is I'm not sure, and I have to verify this for the next episode, but I think that in the Blue Book, Buckland does use the lord and lady.
Yeah.
And I always thought that, they used it really to the lord and lady was something that was used to refer to the god and the goddess. So the lord and the lady.
Exactly.
But I think that because of the attachments to the high priest and high priestess to the channeling of the gods, that eventually trickled down into into them being Lord blah and Lady
Yeah.
blah. But I'm not sure if this is my theory.
Yep.
It's Karagan's theory. It might be wrong. It's just my opinion. However, I mean, I know that they used it in some instances in England, but I don't think. I mean, there are Gardnerians, I think, that really laugh a lot about that because they don't really feel that is actually even remotely, used or whatever, and it never did or something like that. But to tell you the truth, I'm not sure where it comes from, but certainly very much used in traditional Wicca in the United States and also outside of it.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of Lord Buck something and Lady Moonshine. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. It sounds very Renaissance fair. That's the problem that I have with it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that it might be a reference of a fantasy of ancient times, perhaps, and remotely, connected with the English aristocracy. I don't know. I have no clue. But the fact is that it's not really used, in covens, and I don't use it. I was not taught to use it, and it's just something that we do. There are some instances when you can use it, but we rarely do. Rarely do. And then it's that thing, right? Nobody will, if it is Lord something or Lady something, you never say this in circle. You never say, Lord blah blah blah. Can you please pass the one? I mean, nobody does this. It's just.
I'm sure some do. I'm sure some do out there.
So probably, but it's just so rare that you actually talk like this. It's not even rare. We don't. We just don't. And it's just very, going back to the magical names. The magical names have a very specific use in magic in our practice. So they're very, and then again, this is probably because we were trained differently than other people, and some people didn't get this. But what I was taught was this. This is a very specific way of using it in magic. Inside of a magic circle should never be used outside. So that is what I know, right? Yeah. So I might have received something that other people didn't, and that's probably the reason why some people that are probably listening to us, they don't really know how to. And we're not going to go into detail here. But the fact is that there is a very specific use of the magical names, and they're used for certain and specific things inside of the magic circle. So, of course, because of that, we're not going to reveal any details. And that's, for me, that's what it is. The Lord and the Lady, it's just, and then it goes into it. There's like this whole thing, because sometimes people, and I think this is what happens with different countries, when things go to a different country, right? They tend to, because it hasn't the origin. So the origin was the UK, and of course, Alex and Maxine's covens, all of that. If you were not there in the coven, and if you were a traveler, like, for instance, Suminus was, that he went there and then he received the degrees and then came back to the United States with them. And then he started to train people and form a coven, etc. There are certain things that are lost in translation.
Absolutely.
And, of course, if you don't understand something very well, you might not want to give that up, meaning you might not want to admit that you don't know. Yep. And because of that, you will go into this let's make it up kind of thing, which it starts very innocently and very not really with that intention of, let's lie about it, but let's just paint this little gap here with a little, marker of our own. And then suddenly this comes out of ignorance and comes out of lack of understanding and probably lack of training. And then suddenly this whole thing takes another shape.
Yeah.
And then you have the lords and the ladies, and you have like, oh yeah, well, there's like ceremonies now to lords and ladies, and and the this and that. So there's this whole invention
Yeah.
when the craft is really very direct and very simple.
Yeah.
And if you do that, if you change those things which are very simple and very direct, you're actually defiling the whole thing and really watering it down, as you said. It's not what we do at all.
Yeah.
So I think that's the reason why sometimes it's very difficult for some people that go into other countries, especially the countries that are not of the origin of this particular tradition, and it takes hold into this other thing that is perhaps rules are made up, things that are made up, that have a sequence of the events that were not that very clear, or the teaching was not clear, and then they don't remember something like that, and then let's make it up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
Then it just becomes overcomplicated, right?
yes,
Overcomplication. And I think there's also, and I absolutely agree with you, Karagan. I'm sure there were, but most people were not set out to lie when they're making things up. I think also it's the pressures of the office, in the sense of, here you are, third degree, or a high priest or high priestess, and you are supposed to know these things. But in actuality, just because you have attained the higher degrees absolutely does not make you an expert in the craft in all ways, and you will be constantly learning, right? And there's a constant stream of I don't know. And let me try to figure that out and find out for you. So you're not making things up.
exactly, and that's what we don't want. It's for people to make things up.
Make it up. Yeah.
Let's not do that.
And then, what do you think too about so magical names? Just to go back to this, and I'm not maybe I'm not talking about like Alexandrian, like how we receive our magical names, but those people who are like, well, the goddess Hecate appeared to me, and then she said that my true name is this. You get a lot of those stories out there.
You do.
And what's real and what do you think? What's true? What's false?
This is very interesting, and it's a very interesting subject, especially because of various traditions in the occult history that actually use that method, which is a method of receiving some kind of name directly from deity. And this is not new. This is something that has happened all over history, especially in those instances. And I'm thinking about, for instance, the angelic system of Magdalene Montalban, which actually uses that method as well. So an attribution of a name that it's special and only for you through deity directly. And this is very interesting. And sometimes, the name would be revealed to you in different ways, depending on what is the tradition that we're talking about. But, because of the nature of society today, and because of where we are as human race at the moment, I think that is quite opened to speculation, which means that how do we know if that's actually true, that you actually received a name from, from a deity? When I hear the goddess gave me, or the goddess talked to me and said, I'm always very worried.
Yes.
Because good for you, right? Good for you. But that is your experience. Nothing is proving to me that experience actually is true. It's wonderful that you think that it's true for you, and that has that meaning for you. But until the goddess comes back to me and says, I give this name to that person, then I'm not going to confirm or deny it. I think
that's very good of you.
Probably will deny it.
I'm like, that's very democratic of you in terms of, not denying, nor, I don't know.
Yeah. So, and I tend to ignore it. Well, I'm Lady blah, 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 because I was named by, I could say blah, blah, blah in that day, or that's a blah. And I tend to play the, that's how interesting. And then I just move on to another thing. So I just don't really dwell in these episodes, very long, so that I don't feed. I mean, I think that this came from my nursing training as well. But, I don't feed into the madness.
Yeah.
One of the things that is very interesting now that we're talking about this is the collective experience of a coven. When you have more than one person that actually felt something,
yes,
or saw something or witnessed something, then it becomes very difficult to refute because it and dispute that particular experience, because it was a collective one.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean that there is not collective delusion, which we know that there is. But that makes it a little better, or a little more acceptable in terms of the truthfulness of that particular event, or that particular power coming down, or whatever it is. A very interesting example of this, and we have to think about these things in various perspectives. There is mass delusions. There is and has been mass delusions, which is an event that will happen when a lot of people are present. They all experience that event, and it doesn't mean that the event actually happened that way.
Yeah.
And, the interpretation of this is very susceptible to doubt, because we don't really know. And normally this happens more often than not I'm talking about Salem as well, but, other instances, for instance, Fatima in Portugal, where they say that a lady appeared to 3 children on top of an olive tree. And there is this episode in this whole story. People came and they begin to believe them. And there is one episode on this, where there was thousands of people in this field, and they swear that the sun revolved in the sky in a spiraling manner. And they all say that there's photographs of this, actually. The sun spiraled in the sky, and this was witnessed by thousands of people. Now, we have to be very pragmatic about this, because, of course, there is a lot of sun, there's a lot of heat.
Yep.
It was in the summer, and of course, people will be. There's such a thing as heat stroke that could actually, if done, to thousands of people at the same time, could spiral into this delusional belief that they actually are. And it does take just one person to point to the sky and say, "Look at the sun!"
Exactly.
And everyone
look. I see it too. Yeah.
Yes. Do you know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
be very careful with these kinds of things. Because
we often call this, not me, so therefore professionals call this, social contagion.
Yes.
Right. So therefore, and there are, for example, like anorexia is often considered to be a social contagion, where one person gets it. I think this is in China. One person, because it was almost unheard of in China, and then one person gets it, and then it spreads all of a sudden. And I think this whole idea too, Hecate is obviously talking to a lot of people right now. If you go on social media, so I think that too is almost like, it's like social contagion. Oh, she's speaking to me too. She's calling to me too. I see it too. So absolutely, just because you're in a mass number of people and you're all quote unquote witnessing the same thing doesn't mean it's actually happening. And I think those moments, even in the, the collective group in the coven, those moments are also, from my own experience, rare, when something really does occur beyond the scope, perhaps, of being able to reason it out, where you all have experienced something in that.
How do we know that this is actually true?
That's the problem, right? So therefore, how do you know that this is actually true? Because I've also been in circles where I'm like, oh, this is BS, and being like, I know this person might be believing what they're saying or doing, but I don't know. It's sort of like, the wizard behind the curtain. How do I know though that I'm right and that person's wrong? Oh, that's a good question. I guess my training, and not only my training in the craft, but also like my professional life training in terms of critical thinking and critically analyzing a situation, being pragmatic. I think pragmatism is really important in the craft. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
Yes,
but yeah,
more important. Yeah.
It's difficult. How do you know it's true? And I'm sure you have been in situations, Karagan, where you're like, oh, geez.
Oh, more than once.
Right, more than
Can
more
I
than
just
once.
leave now? Yeah.
Yeah. And then how do you know when it's really happening?
Yes. So for me, and this is a question that came to me various times. I mean, during my experience in the craft, and and sometimes, very rarely, actually, I would actually confirm this. Unfortunately, so what that means is that I had more experiences of people that were faking it rather than not.
Exactly.
But do you know what I mean? Because we all want a true experience, and
Yeah.
we want that, which is to touch divinity, to actually experience the power, to be there, and to, and you want it to be true. Of course you want it to be true. But how do you know if it is true? Well, you do know. Because if you were touched once by true power and or experienced it, and or were witnessed a true drawing down the moon and invocation of the god, you know what you're looking for. Now, for those who never tasted coffee in their lives, they will never know how to describe coffee, and they won't identify coffee anywhere in the world. But if you do have tasted once, you know what it is. So what, for me, that reality, that point of truth is measurable in what stayed with me. Because a true experience always leaves something with you, and an untruthful one never does. So when something happens and it stays with you to the point where it can transform you in ways that enhances either your consciousness of the world, or, took me, I think 35 minutes to talk about consciousness.
Yeah.
But, I can't help it. So when that is something that stayed with you to the point that it will carry over to your own work and experience and enhanced your own experience, that is, for me, true. So if you have that experience, you can spot false performances right away. So for me, true experience will stay with you, and then of course this is very personal. Then again, I mean, this might have been truthful for me, but you were there as well and you didn't feel this, therefore it isn't for you. But I think that it depends, because different experiences speak differently to people. So people will probably say to you, oh, that was a very good experience and I really felt, blah, blah, blah. But does it stay?
Yeah.
Now, permanence of experience, That to me is what tells me that it's true or not. I don't know about you, but
I like this idea. It's really it's difficult because then we talk about, you just talked about, personal truth in the sense of, well, what's true to me is not necessarily true to the other person. I like this idea of, does it stay? Does that experience stay with you? And when it does, then that is something that you're always then striving for. So therefore, when you enter circle, then you're working towards that moment of truth, right? You're always working to get that back. And then did it happen or did it not happen? I've certainly been in circle where I've had, a coven mate be like, oh, that was the most powerful circle I've been in, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, God, I didn't feel anything in that circle. So yeah, which truth is accurate? And I guess what we're going for is, truth with the capital T, right? The truth, the ultimate truth. And how do you, I don't know. I'm not completely convinced in terms of whose truth is the truth with the capital T. I think I'm talking in riddles. Do you know what I mean? And then I think some people tap into the capital T, and I think there's a lot of people who don't and experience a shade of it, or it's delusional, or they think they have. Like, how many times?
I think that you will never know. Because truth is perceived externally to the so it really isn't you, it's your perception. You know what I mean? So it's not something that you would very scientifically say, this is a religious experience, which is of course very personal, of course very experiential, and of course very different from person to person. Sometimes I actually have done rituals, which I thought that were good, they were good. But people afterwards say to me, this was like, it had an impact on me. There was like, that part where this and this happened. And I remember that part, but I don't remember that part that inflated.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like
that intense.
But it depends on so many things. The level of frequency that the person is in terms of energy, how open the person is at that particular moment. There's so many variables here that is very difficult. What I think that can be permanent, that we can actually grasp out of this religious, very, very thin air, kind of smoky, not touchable, very, not solid kind of thing of truth, is if it stays and if it does work on you, which means does it have any consequence in terms of how you feel, how you act afterwards, or how you behave, or if it helped you in any way. So truth, for those people that said, look at the sun and the sun is spiraling, for them that was the confirmation, even though delusional perhaps, but it was a confirmation that what they were witnessing, because, you have to understand, the thousands of people they couldn't see the Virgin in the top of that tree. They only saw the children on their knees.
Yeah.
And the children were talking to her. So they never saw it. For them, that was the confirmation that all of them could be, and of course you want to be part of the whole. You want to be part of that group. You want to be part of the,
you don't want to be left out.
No. And now, what really is interesting here is to think about how many covens work and operate like this. Delusion. And
delusion,
when you say pragmatism is really good, and Alex and Maxine did this often, which was testing things. They put things to the test, almost like a scientific method. Does it really work? Does it not work? Can we do that? And then they would try a different way, things like that. So they really approach the craft in a very methodical way. And I think that we all have this in terms of, and I think that prevents some of this delusion to continue. And we always have this pragmatism. And then, of course, when true experience come forth, you know that it is
Yeah.
true because it is so strong and so clear that it's not really, because we're so pragmatic about things. And we want true results. We don't want just a sensation or, oh, maybe that was because. No, we want to know exactly what happened. In that sense, I think that, when Laurie Cabot talks about witchcraft as a science, I think that I know what she's talking about.
Yeah.
Now, that takes us into another thing, which is channeling. And this is, of course, included here. How do we know if the channeling is or not true? It is very difficult because there's egos at play, right?
Yeah.
In terms of channeling. Channeling has been something that has happened for thousands of years since the beginning of time.
Absolutely, right?
And probably there was this woman or man that went into a trance and began to talk out of character, out of himself or herself. And that was the first shaman and the first channel, maybe because of the fumes of the woods that were inside of that cave. But the thing is that it is something that happened, and it's ingrained in our own DNA. The fact that we call it many things, we sanitize it over centuries, and now we call it intuition for the lay people to be comfortable with it. But, it's your sixth sense, things like that. But I think that it's very important for people to do that because it's what they call the bridge, right? That somebody that can, go to the other side and speak and channel and all of that. Many traditions, truly marvelous traditions have been part of history all over the years, in tribes in the United States, in Mexico, everywhere in the world. You see this, in the northern Europe, they have the High Seat, which is a ritual that they do. The Oracle of Apollo, in
Delphi. Yeah.
So you have all of this, and this is very interesting because how do we know if that is really the words of a divine being?
I'm always suspicious of it because I have to think about all of the covens working. And then I'm like, wait a minute. So all of these covens working, all of these people are channelers and are speaking, or the divine is coursing through them. I just don't know statistically if that's even a possibility. Do you understand what I mean? Like, I think, I don't know. Is channeling taught? Is that something that you could be trained in? Are channelers born with that ability? And then I think there are many people out there who think they're channeling and they're not channeling at all. It's just their own subconscious. Which to say, what does that mean? Maybe it really is being channeled right through your subconscious, and you're seeing symbols and whatnot. I get very suspicious about somebody speaking the words of deity.
You just pointed out a couple of things that are very interesting. In terms of the channeling. Divinity is big in the sense of immeasurable. We can't really measure deity. So we really don't know how that works, truthfully. I mean,
we don't.
It's a mystery, and it's very good that it is actually a mystery, because mysteries will endure for all eternity, and that is a good thing, which means that this will carry on.
Exactly.
Independently of where we are and what happened. But the thing is that my experience in terms of this is that it's very rarely true that you have a genuine experience. Normally is you have a couple of things. One is the experience of the channeler or the person that it's at that particular position at the point of the ritual. And they will be experiencing something very strongly or whatever it is. and they feel that they need to voice it out.
Yeah.
Something. And that could be taken, oh, it's the words of the goddess, or it's the words of the god, or whatever. Which is not. It's just a reaction of the individual to a very strong experience that could eventually be, when divinity is speaking, and that is the channeling that we're talking about, it's very clear that it's true, because the way that things come out has a feeling and a characteristic that you can ask me and you can argue, well, people can learn to fake. Yes, sure, they can. But when this happens, the sequence, the quality of it, it's very specific. And you can immediately know, this is not the person speaking. This is not that person. And this is something that, and it's not only that, you identify that it's not that person, but that which is coming out, it has such a quality that it is absolutely not of this world. Do you see what I mean? So it's really very, very, very specific. So have I ever witnessed something like this? Once. So, and it was very, I mean, I'm very grateful that I did, because now I can identify.
Yeah. But that's incredible to say, Karagan, that in all of your years of experience, of continual practice, right, of the craft, to say that only once did you know it to be true. So it really speaks, and I would say the same for me. Only once have I seen it, and experienced that, and to know it that that was something. So I think it speaks to of the rarity of that, and all the other is just this shadow, where somebody's getting maybe little bits and pieces, or it's just based on feeling. Or it's delusional.
It's very interesting that you say that, because sometimes, and this was not training of Alexandrian tradition, this was another experience that I had before that I was told that the gods, I think that this is a very interesting perspective, that the gods had worshippers that would be a host of spirits that would accompany that particular goddess or that particular god, because they dedicated their lives to the deity, the god or the goddess in the ancient world. They actually became part of it after they passed the veil, which means that they were now the horde of, whatever goddess or this god, and they would be connected to this as almost like ramifications of deity of that particular god or goddess, and they would come themselves first before that god or that goddess would come directly. And that is why you could explain that many people in many places could actually have this channeling in different places, because there would be a lot of hosts of that deity. It was not the deity proper, but it would be, some
adjacent.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they would be servants of, but they were connected directly to that deity, and that would be. I mean, but this is just something that I was told that at the time made sense to me.
Yeah.
But it's very organizational. It's very human thinking, isn't it? Because we're trying to compartmentalize and try to find a way of actually explaining how that happened. And we might come up with, I think that deity is continuous and infinite. and they don't really have limits on their revibration into the world of man. So I think that it would be easy for us to not understand how that works because we're human.
Exactly. I think it makes sense, this idea, right, of like these cohorts, because you have to think like in just the history of religion, most cultures practice some form of ancestor worship, right? So therefore, when your ancestors have passed through, like those are the ones that will intercede for you, right, on the other side between deity and humankind. So you have that sort of familial link that allows you to receive these messages through an intermediary, and then physical intermediary, here on the planet. But no, the divine is infinite, right? And who am I to say that Hecate can't come through millions of people simultaneously?
It might,
right? Maybe she can.
Maybe she can't.
And I'm the jerk doubting it.
No, you're not. I think that we should doubt. Without a doubt is dangerous.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
So we do need to doubt. And the reason why we need to doubt, it's because without doubt, we would be, the experience wouldn't be as strong and significant when we actually realize that is actually true.
Yeah.
You see?
I do.
This is why we talked about faith the other day. And
exactly.
What we do is really not faith.
It's not faith. No.
Right. And it's very interesting, This takes us very briefly into another thing. Well, by the way, we do have a blog in Medium that I should talk about. It's basically our own transcripts. It's based on the transcripts of our podcasts. So the highlights and of the ideas that we exposed into the podcast episode. So it's a little bit of a reflection on what we talked about, maybe a little bit more. And it's a wonderful way to go further even more into and in depth into the ideas that we put forward in our podcast.
Exactly, because we just kind of scratched the surface. We could talk hours and hours and hours about one small topic.
Yeah, I think that people don't know. We decided to do this podcast because our conversations were, we thought that it was worthwhile.
Absolutely.
To record. To record the conversations. Methods of divination. I mean, divination is another thing that it's, do you believe it or not? I mean, how do you know if that person is good or not? I mean, divination is a very interesting thing because it has so many nuances. People say, oh, it's just, and then again, we go back to the channel and the oracles, right? And all of those things. How do we know if it is true? How do we know if it is manipulative? How do we know if it is just a very cunning person that can read signs and micro expressions and things like that? That is actually navigating the flow of the conversation, making sense of things that are probably already there. So, and there's no divination at all. So divination for me is really a very strange word because the divining or what does that mean for you? Divination for you?
Divination, right? So I have to like bat, in terms of the etymology, divining. Yeah. So divine. So so if you're divining, are you acting as a deity, right? Where you are trying to get a viewpoint that is much larger than yours on Earth. Meaning, this is an old movie called The Mothman Prophecies with Richard.
I remember that. Yeah.
And they were trying to explain, who Mothman was in terms, just spiritually, cosmically.
Right.
And there was this fantastic definition that I still sort of use to this day, is that, here we are on Earth, and if we're in a city, for example, Manhattan, there might be a car accident that occurs, several blocks away from where we're standing. And because of our perspective on the ground, we cannot see, right, that car accident. However, this creature, this entity, you would have to imagine that this entity might be standing on the top of one of the skyscrapers of Manhattan. And not only can they see that car accident because of where they are perched, but they probably also saw it about to happen too, because of their perspective. So I think when we're talking about divination, we are trying to be on that skyscraper where we can see farther and further. And in that way, trying to link ourselves to a higher, right, a higher being or a higher thing, quite literally, honestly, right?
Yes.
A higher perspective.
Yes.
Now, the problem for me, and I'll speak for myself with divination, is that I doubt myself. And am I actually seeing farther and further? Am I actually tapping into that when I'm reading tarot, for example? And then what is my brain doing, right? So therefore, how is my brain receiving this information? How is it interpreting that information? And how is my perspective and interpretation shaded by my feelings for the day, or my feelings on the question that I have asked? So in many ways, I feel like I can't read for myself. It's way too caught up in interpretation.
Well, as a human experience, again, there is a lot of doubt,
Yes.
in it. But the word definition comes from the Latin divinare,
Yep.
or divinare, meaning to foresee or foretell or predict or some kind of prophecy. Ultimately, this basically stemming from the divinos or divinos, meaning of a god or inspired by a god. Now, the Latin root of this is the core word lies in the Latin verb divinare, which is, of course, translates to foresee or foretell. Divinos or divinos, it's the connection for it. It's divinare. It's closely related to the Latin word divinos, meaning of a god or inspired by a god. And of course, this is what really we were talking about when we talked about channel and a channeling. This is in terms of even in our own craft. It's exactly what we're talking about. What is the percentage of that we hear is what we want to hear, actually?
Yeah.
That
exactly.
person is actually feeding us things that we want to hear. We were talking about the last episode that we did, episode 4. We were talking about how we do not remember. We do not remember what we said.
Exactly.
Or we don't remember what we experienced in circle. And that was because our subconscious mind was taking over. And that is true for religious ritual experience, or ritual experience in general. I tend to think that the way that I see if this is actually me, not making it up and actually based on the definition of the word actually divinos or divinus, or divinare, in terms of me being a channel for deity at that particular moment and foresee or say something, is when I don't remember what I said.
Oh, interesting.
I don't remember. Sometimes I do, but sometimes I don't remember. And then people come to me and says, when you read, when you did definition for me and you said blah, blah, and then it actually happened, so I don't remember or recall that I have said that to the person.
Yeah.
So for me, it's almost like that. When you are at that point, and this is what really should happen, it should be, yes, the meaning of cards, and there's like thousands of things that in terms of tarot cards, for instance, you have thousands of meanings and nuances, etc., etc. Paul Forster case and the builders are the BOTA is just an amazing method for the tarot and also for studying the hidden meanings and the wisdom that is ingrained in these wonderful universal pictures. But those are just one way of actually doing that. It doesn't matter what you use. For me, doesn't matter. I can just pick up 3 little sticks from the sidewalk and tell you whatever, because it's not about what the tool I'm using, what is the tool that I'm using. It's about the divinare.
Yeah.
See what I mean?
Yeah. And that tool is whatever it is just a trigger, right? It's just sort of
It's just a trigger.
to connect you to that.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what I think. But then again, I mean, careful with who you actually asked to divine for you, because that experience might not be exactly a divinare experience.
No, it might not be a divinare experience, or it could be a divinare experience, and then sometimes you just don't want to hear what that person has to say.